What's going on YouTube? It's TH back again with another video, and today we are coming at you with my 2022 NFL Draft Redraft Edition. So yesterday we did our regrade of the 2022 draft and going team by team, giving out our updated grades. And today let's go ahead and just kind of ponder, maybe if every team got a chance to do it over again for the 2022 draft, how might the board play out differently? There's definitely guys sneaking into the first round, and there's definitely guys that ultimately fall out of the first round. Before we get started, I have to start. This is the toughest class to do it with. That's why I wanted to do 2022 first, and then we're going to go back to 2021 and then 2020. We only have 1 year of a sample size for all these guys, so it's really tough to make a whole lot of movement. Some players will stay where they are, some will have small movements, some will have more bigger shifts on the board. But let me hear your thoughts down below in the comments section. If your team could do it over in 2022, what do you think they might do differently? And ultimately, looking back at your 2022 draft class, what do you think of your team's class? I'd love to hear your thoughts down below in the comment section. Like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and of course check out BetUS. Their links for sign-up offers are down below in the description. We're going to say thank you to BetUS for sponsoring today's video. And let's go ahead and get started with the number 1 overall pick. This was Trayvon Walker in real life, but here I think Jacksonville would ultimately opt to go with Sauce Gardner. To me, there was no better rookie year one than Sauce Gardner. And I think that's opinion that's shared across the board for the most part. Walker's an intriguing prospect, but especially when you take into account the Tyson Campbell breakout that we now have with hindsight, pairing him up with Sauce Gardner would make an insane duo on the outside for Jacksonville. So then at number 2, this is going to be one that I do keep the same with Aiden Hutchinson going to Detroit. This was one where a lot of Lions fans were saying, please, Jacksonville, don't take Hutchinson, and then ultimately they didn't, so they got their chance to take their guy, and I think they would do the same thing if Sauce went number 1. Then we get to Houston here at 3. Man, this is where it starts to get tricky. Obviously this was Derek Stingley Jr. in real life, and I'm still a big believer in Derek Stingley Jr. in his game. But should he be the next corner off the board? That's kind of where I'm getting a little... This is getting a little tough. I'll stick with DSJ just because I do buy into that upside a ton. And yeah, while his rookie year may not have been as good as Tariq Woolen, who's going to get in the first round here, I think the potential is still there for him to become that good of a player, if not better than Woolen. So time will tell. And this is where, again, it's so tough to do this with just 1 year's worth of sample size. But I think that Houston would be wise to stick with DSJ and buy into that upside. Then the Jets here at 4. I thought about a couple different directions. Maybe Ikem Ekwonu, especially with hindsight. Now there's a tackle need we know about. But with Sauce gone, I think they would want to stick with at least one of those 2 Rookie of the Years. Garrett Wilson then as the pick at number 4. He was great with the Jets. And, of course, now with the hindsight of having Aaron Rodgers on the roster going into 2023-24, you want him to have that number 1 guy, and that's what Garrett Wilson is. Then the Giants here at pick number 5. I'm going to go with Ikem Ekwonu. Charles Cross was the number 1 tackle in last year's rankings, but I think Ikem Ekwonu may be a little bit more of their scheme block or scheme fit. Not that Cross wouldn't fit necessarily, but there were question marks about his run game. Ultimately, I think he proved in Seattle it's not as big of an issue. But Ikem Ekwonu and Charles Cross, it just comes down to what you weigh more heavily. Cross looked better right away, but as the year went on, I think his results started to become a little bit more mid. Meanwhile, Ikem Ekwonu got to a little bit of a slow start, but by week 4 on, he looked like a superstar tackle in the making. So I think if the Giants got the chance, they would take Ikem Ekwonu, make the flip over to right tackle. So sorry, Evan Neal, you will not be a New York Giant in this redraft. Then we get Carolina here at pick number 6. This is where Ikem Ekwonu ultimately did go off the board. Yeah, and this is another one where this team could go in so many different directions. We thought about maybe it was going to be Kenny Pickett, but ultimately I do think offensive line was the right move. So I'm going to go Charles Cross here. Not that I think Cross was worse than Ikem Ekwonu necessarily. I just think they ended their season with 2 different trajectories. Ikem Ekwonu was heading the right direction, while Charles Cross, good start. I think it got a little more muddy down the stretch. But we saw the impact that having that bookend left tackle made, and ultimately made that, especially once Steve Wilks could take over as the interim head coach, it started to make that offensive line look a whole lot better. I think Ikem Ekwonu is a big part of that, but I think Charles Cross could do a lot of the same stuff. Then we get to the Giants here at 7. I'm going to stick with Kayvon Thibodeau. Yeah, I know it wasn't necessarily the hottest start or anything for Thibodeau with the Giants, but he started to piece it together towards the end of the stretch, and kind of like Derek Stingley Jr., I'm just going to buy into the upside. I liked him a lot as a prospect, and I think there's a ton of potential to mine there. So let's say the Giants keep pat with Thibodeau there at 7. Then the Falcons here at 8. And by the way, I'm not going to do any trades or anything like that, so that is going to be taken off the table here, so to speak. But for the Falcons, man, I think I'll stick with Drake London just because, again, with 1 year sample size, it's not that he was bad. So I don't know if necessarily Drake London should fall anymore down this board, given what we saw his rookie year. Thought about Tariq Woolen here just to pair up Woolen and Terrell. That'd be fun. But with hindsight, they've done some other work to the secondary. So let's just stick with Drake London. That's a big part of the receiving core. And if you take him away, then it's kind of Kyle Pitts, no one else. So I think London does a lot to kind of maintain status quo and give us the image that we have now of the Falcons pass catching core. And if you're an Atlanta fan, there's a lot of optimism around Desmond Ridder. And I think Drake London is a big part of that, being a part of that supporting cast. Then we get to Seattle here at 9. This ultimately was Charles Cross in real life. And here, I'm just going to make it easy for myself. This is where I'm going to have Tariq Woolen come off the board. I don't want to see Woolen leave Seattle. But man, after his rookie season, he was a lot better than I thought he would be right off the jump. And, because of that, I don't think top 10 is out of the question. I think if you were to ask who the 10 best rookies of last year, a lot of people would tell you Tariq Woolen's one of the 10 best rookies, and he was one of the finalists for Defensive Rookie of the Year for a reason. He's a great fit there in Seattle. So he goes from this day 3 pick to a top 10 pick, but we get to keep him in Seattle, which is fun. Then we get to the Jets here at 10, and this is where we start to get to the question of Trayvon Walker. When do we want him to come off the board? But this was Garrett Wilson originally. He also went corner earlier on, and I'm not really in love with the corner value that they have presently on the board. This was a tough one. Thought about a few different things, but ultimately this is where I think I'm going to have Evan Neal come off the board. With hindsight, we know tackle's going to eventually become a need, but there was also talks about Neal being able to play guard, so you get even more flexibility. And again, the advantage is I saw what happened to the Jets last year and how that offensive line really started to crumble with a ton of injuries, and Neal's flexibility kind of feels like it would be a nice way to kind of counteract all that stuff. But he falls a little bit in this redraft. But just because year 1 wasn't great, I don't think that means Evan Neal's going to be a bust by any stretch. And that's why I still want to keep him in this top 10 conversation. Ultimately, he does go at pick number 10 to the Jets. Because, just like what the Giants had with Andrew Thomas, year 1 was rough, but I think they'll be able to work out the kinks. And I think Evan Neal will be more than serviceable as the right tackle of the future, in this case, for the New York Jets. So Washington then here at 11. In real life, Washington ultimately traded back. This became Chris Olave going to New Orleans, and they ultimately go Jahan Dotson then at 16. Man, so do we want to change up Dotson and Olave? Could we go Jameson Williams here? I'll go Chris Olave. I think Olave with Terry McLaurin would be a really fun duo, and I do think Olave is better than Jahan Dotson, so it's an upgrade of sorts. If Evan Neal made it here, this probably would have been a good spot for him to go to as well. Again, hindsight kind of playing a factor into that. And Jameson Williams was my number 1 wide receiver last year, but especially considering we know he gets into a 6-game suspension, makes it a little tough. Then Minnesota, and again, I'm not doing trades. This ultimately was the Lions moving up to 12 to get Jameson Williams. But here, man, Kyle Hamilton's kind of staring me in the face. Good opportunity to replace Harrison Smith, and also Lewis Seen's not going to be in the first round here. So let's have some fun. Let's go Kyle Hamilton. Let's say it's one Notre Dame safety replacing another. And also in this world, we're not going to see Lewis Seen come off the board. So that also means Hamilton is not going to go to Baltimore. So then we get back to the Houston Texans, offensive tackle and edge. I think this is a good spot for Trayvon Walker to come off the board. Obviously, we know they get Will Anderson in 2023, but still, imagine a duo of Anderson plus Walker. If Walker really hits his stride and develops into the prospect that, obviously the Jags and some other people thought that he could be, then that becomes a really interesting 1-2 punch. But, I wasn't all for Trayvon Walker being, the number 1 overall pick. He was much more of that mid-first rounder, intriguing prospect. He's got the upside. So, therefore, I think the range here at 13 makes a ton of sense. And then we get to the Ravens. I remember thinking Jordan Davis was going to be their guy without a doubt. I thought it was a done deal. And ultimately, Philadelphia trades with Houston to leapfrog him. But they ended up getting Travis Jones in the 3rd round. But if we were to take that hindsight out of the picture, let's say Jordan Davis does ultimately become a Calais Campbell replacement and ends up in Baltimore. They kind of had a need at that nose tackle spot, and Jordan Davis was this all-world theory, only one guy that big and that fast and can eat up that much space. So let's say Baltimore's looking for that Campbell replacement. Also, they had some other aging nose tackles on the roster playing alongside Campbell. Let's say Jordan Davis is the young replacement for those guys. So then that takes us to Philadelphia, and this was a first round where Philadelphia, I think, came away with a nice haul of Jordan Davis. And then ultimately they trade from pick 18. And then that becomes Tennessee Titans at 18 taking Treylon Burks. I don't need to recite the entire first round. I'm sure a lot of y'all remember this. It wasn't too long ago. But with that nose tackle off the board, I'm trying to think about what is Howie Roseman doing this spot. And since I'm not doing trades, pick 18 became, the Tennessee Titans because the Eagles got A.J. Brown. So because I'm not doing trades, I feel like I need to give him a wide receiver here. Let's give him Jameson Williams. Now, I do think, Jameson Williams, Devonta Smith doesn't have quite the same, appeal to it, especially considering what we know, Jameson Williams is going to get suspended to start 2023, missed a lot of 2022, all that stuff. But, they used one of these first rounders to get a wide receiver, so I felt like we had to get him one of those names that was still on the board. Williams wasn't my number one wide receiver, like I noted. So with him getting to 15, it would be interesting to see what, in an alternate universe, him plus Devonta Smith looks like, but ultimately A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, I think that lucked out a little bit better there for Philadelphia. So hats off to Howie Roseman. I think he made the best decision. Like I said multiple times last year, I think the Eagles left the first round with the best player acquired, and that was A.J. Brown. So I think if you got the chance to do it again, they would. Anyways, let's move on to New Orleans. And they had a couple of first rounders, Chris Olave, plus Trevor Penning. And Penning, I think, is in play here, but we didn't really get to see a whole lot of him in his first year in New Orleans. But focusing on the wide receiver side, since we couldn't give them Chris Olave, why don't we say Treylon Burks, or, why don't we have George Pickens, and you could even say Christian Watson maybe make it into the first round here. I wouldn't hate that whatsoever. Burks, I think, will probably still be someone that we take here in the first round, but I kind of like Pickens and Watson a little bit more here with hindsight, but Pickens and then New Orleans offense could be a lot of fun. So since we couldn't get him Chris Olave, let's find a way to replace that production lost, and let's go with George Pickens, who with hindsight, maybe should have been a first rounder. We get the Chargers here at 17. You know what, this is where I'll go. Christian Watson. This would have been fun to give them Jordan Davis just because that felt like a fit we saw a ton throughout the 2022 draft cycle. But here, Christian Watson, you gain that speed, right? Like ultimately they get that guy in 2023 with Quentin Johnston. But maybe if they went Christian Watson here at 17, it allows them to go in a different direction in 2023. But it is kind of fun to think about, hey, still building a basketball team. And be interesting, if you're a Chargers fan, as a prospect, who would you have preferred, Quentin Johnston or Christian Watson? Obviously we know what Watson looks like at least through 1 year at the NFL level, but just as prospects, maybe which one intrigues you more and which would you have preferred, just looking at him as prospects, to be a Los Angeles Chargers? Love to hear your thoughts. I think Watson might just barely edge out Quentin Johnston. I don't know. Johnston, it's tough. I think you get more legitimate yak ability versus like Christian Watson's catch, and then he's just so fast and athletic he can outrun dudes, versus I think Quentin Johnston can legitimately just be an extension of the run game of sorts and be bubble screen, heavy as a part of the offense. So anyways, moving on to Philadelphia now. So we went Jameson Williams and got on that wide receiver. Corner's intriguing here. Linebacker also fascinating. Could they go Devin Lloyd? It's not really a Howie Roseman move. That's where I'm going to have Jermaine Johnson come off the board. We didn't get to see a whole lot of Jermaine Johnson in 2022, but I do still think that the first round, love was warranted. I wasn't here for him being number 4 overall pick to the Jets. I think that was too rich for my blood. And ultimately, they made the right decision going with Sauce. But still, being somewhere here in the first round, I think is a worthwhile value for Johnson. And this does feel very Howie Roseman. Go ahead and get that defensive line depth. And Jermaine Johnson would have made for an interesting fit in Philadelphia. Then we get to the New Orleans Saints and a guy who played really, really well. Instead of going Trevor Penning, let's go Tyler Smith. Needed to move to tackle a lot quicker than the Dallas Cowboys even expected. So guard tackle flexibility maybe to start. And I'm not crazy about Andrus Peat, but also with hindsight, we know they move on. They're not picking up the fifth year option at least on Cesar Ruiz. No guarantee they move on, but that's the first step in the direction of not keeping Cesar Ruiz and moving on in a different direction. But Tyler Smith would have been an interesting, left tackle option. Super athletic, needed to clean up, the hand placement and some of the technique. Was very handsy and had a ton of penalties there at Tulsa. But him versus Penning, it's both project tackles, and ultimately through 1 year, I'm feeling better about Tyler Smith than I am Trevor Penning. So let's go there for New Orleans. For Pittsburgh, I'm going to keep this one simple. I'm going to go with Kenny Pickett. He was QB4 for me, but after seeing this past season, I think myself and other Steelers fans have some good optimism about Kenny Pickett, and ultimately he's going to be the only quarterback we get going in the first round, because especially after what we saw in 2022, I think Pickett probably the only guy that played like someone who maybe should have been selected in the first round. So I'm still not the world's biggest Kenny Pickett believer, it's unfortunate he plays for my favorite team as a Steelers fan, because I want to buy in, but at the same time, the prospect, I wasn't fully in on, but I'd happily accept being wrong on this one. I just wonder what that ceiling is like, but with only one quarterback going in the first round, I think Kenny Pickett, Pittsburgh, this is the opportunity that I'm going to keep it the same and keep that connection. Then we get to New England here at 21. Yeah, and this was a spot here, refresh my memory. New England, yeah, they traded back and ultimately go Cole Strange, so I am not going to do that this time around. I actually think Devin Lloyd would be an interesting selection for them. Good pass rusher, so he kind of fits in as that Dante Hightower replacement, can do some stuff with him as a blitzer. But he was the one linebacker last year I was like, yeah, I really like him as a first-round option. I did like Nakobe Dean as well, but I thought because of his size that ultimately he wouldn't go in the first round. Well, Lloyd didn't have those concerns, so I think the fit there in New England actually does make a ton of sense. Treylon Burks could also be an option there. Then Green Bay here at 22. They won't get Christian Watson, so let's give them Treylon Burks here at 22, and then we'll kind of reassess. Devontae Wyatt, Quay Walker, their first round. And I'm actually more interested probably in keeping Devontae Wyatt there at 28 versus Quay Walker, but that is just, that's just me for right now. But knowing we're not going to do a second round here, they probably would wait, but hey, in this redraft, I'm the one making the picks for all the teams, so let's say Brian Gutekunst decides to change his mind, decides to try to keep Aaron Rodgers happy and draft some first-round wide receiver. Knew it wouldn't happen in real life, but in redraft, anything's possible. Next, Arizona here at 23. So just want to refresh and take a look at who is still available here. George Karlaftis could make for an interesting option. Devontae Wyatt could certainly be in play here. Zion Johnson. I mean, the Cardinals needed interior offensive line help last year. Let alone, thereafter, and what we see this past offseason. Still got Tyler Linderbaum, who I think was a great value for the Ravens to get after they traded Hollywood Brown. That's ultimately who was taken here. It was Tyler Linderbaum, as Arizona traded this first-round pick for Linderbaum. Still got Kenyon Green, who was rough year one, but I don't want to give up on him wholesale. And safety is also interesting as well. So, God, a few different options. I think I'm going to go Zion Johnson. That felt like a fit that made sense to me at the time with Arizona. Guard, center flexibility, could even play a little bit of tackle, especially with hindsight, seeing how dire that situation kind of gets in 2023 and the retool process they're heading down towards. I think Zion Johnson would have been a nice way maybe to kind of kickstart in that direction. Plus, got to keep a clean pocket for a shorter quarterback in Kyler Murray. And Zion Johnson, to me, looked really good as a rookie. So I think pick number 23 warranted what we've seen through one season. For the Cowboys here at 24, this is where I'm going to have Tyler Linderbaum come off the board. I think they can do better than Tyler Biadasz, and I think Linderbaum is definitely that. And I think we have already been able to see that with Baltimore. So Dallas, of all teams, is going to know and understand the importance of having a great center. And who knows, maybe if they did get their hands on Tyler Linderbaum, he could have been that next Travis Frederick-like dude. Then we get to the Bills here, and they took Kyer Elam. They actually traded up to get Kyer Elam. I'm going to give him Trent McDuffie, though. To me, McDuffie was a better fit for their scheme versus Elam, who was much more man-press type of archetype. Trent McDuffie, comes from a zone-heavy defense in Washington, and because he's a little bit smaller but such a fluid athlete, I thought he would make for a perfect pairing with Tre'Davious White. That was one of my favorite fits of last year. Unfortunately, didn't come to fruition because Kansas City had other plans in mind, but I think if he didn't make it to Buffalo, he would be an awesome fit in that defense. So then we get to Tennessee, and obviously no Treylon Burks, but in this world, they also haven't made the trade for A.J. Brown, so maybe we can rewrite history just enough and say that, maybe John Robinson was worth giving A.J. Brown the money that he deserved. And I'm also trying to take into account here, Tennessee did trade back again in the first round, and then ultimately it was the Jets moving up to take Jermaine Johnson, and then Tennessee, after trading back, took corner. And I actually think Kyer Elam would actually be a really solid fit, and he's certainly much more of the prototypical build for a corner than Roger McCreary. So we're going to have the Tennessee Titans stay put here and basically go Kyer Elam instead of Roger McCreary. Now, Elam didn't look great, and there was even points of last year where there's a day 3 pick, Christian Benford, playing and starting over him. So that's a great look right away. But I was a big fan of Kyer Elam. I actually think that fit in Tennessee makes a little bit more sense for him versus what happened in Buffalo. But hey, we'll see with some time. Maybe ultimately I'll change my mind on that. Tampa Bay here at 27. This is also a tricky one because they too traded down. This became the Jags taking Devin Lloyd. And then with the trade back, they took Logan Hall, who could go here, or we could go Devontae Wyatt. George Karlaftis is intriguing here. Could also add to the secondary. I'm going to go Devontae Wyatt, though. Let's go Wyatt. He's a little bit of an older prospect, but pairing him up with Vita Vea kind of feels like what we just saw Tampa got to do with Kalijah Kancey in 2023. And by going Wyatt here, maybe they do pivot and go in a different direction. That being said, they went Hall and then took Kancey, so maybe they just double up and the IDO on back-to-back drafts. But we're focusing here on 2022. We're rewriting history. And I think Devontae Wyatt plus Vita Vea makes for an awesome 1-2 punch there on the inside. Then Green Bay here at 28. So obviously they don't have the opportunity to take Devontae Wyatt. They could still go defensive line, or they could go edge, and let's go George Karlaftis here. opportunity to replace Preston Smith maybe a year earlier than they will in real life. Karlaftis plus Rashawn Gary feels like you have a really strong bookend edge duo there. Do I wish you had somebody with a little bit more bend in speed? Yeah, sure. Karlaftis not necessarily that guy, so if you wanted to pivot and go with a different one of these edge rushers, maybe David Ojabo, but I don't know, considering how much time he missed in year one. Should he be in the first round? I would probably err on the side of saying no. So let's go Karlaftis here and just add more defensive line depth to this Green Bay roster. That typically is prioritizing things of that nature. Then we get to Kansas City, and they went double defense. They went corner and edge here. So, man, I'm trying to think about what corner I think could make sense here. I'm fine with Andrew Booth Jr., but did he really play like someone who should go in the first round? Not entirely sure. And I'm almost more intrigued by Jalen Petrie, considering this was the offseason where they lost Tyrann Mathieu. Now, I know Dax Hill's here, and you can do a lot of the same stuff. So let's actually go Dax Hill. But after seeing 1 year of Jalen Petrie and his playmaking ability, he needs to clean up the tackling, but got a nose for the football, can force forced fumbles, and then can create turnovers. We saw him be a playmaker with the ball in the air too. So Petrie was kind of intriguing and could be an opportunity to replace the Honey Badger, but a lot of the same stuff could be said about Dax Hill. So let's just go ahead and make it Dax Hill as a pick for Kansas City here at 29. And then Kansas City back up on the clock at 30. Could you go wide receiver here? You could. Not really in love with a whole lot of the names here, and I almost just kind of wish George Karlaftis had made it to this point because he would be a solid selection here at 30 as well. All right, so after thinking about it for a little bit, I think I'm going to go tackle here. Just knowing that right tackle eventually becomes an opening, I kind of want to go with Abe Lucas here. I still liked Bernard Ryman a little bit more as a prospect, but after seeing what Lucas could do, especially in a pass-heavy offense at college at Washington State, and then that translating to Seattle where he was a pretty good pass protector, maybe even better of a run blocker than we thought, and then some people could even sell me on an argument that he played better than Charles Cross year one. Now, granted, maybe that's just through 1 year sample, and there's plenty of people who could sell me an argument the other way around, but I think they were both really impressive rookies, and I think both maybe, with hindsight, should go in the first round, and here, Kansas City gets the chance to just draft, plug and play a right tackle, and move on from Andrew Wiley a year earlier and just say, hey, Lucas Niang, sorry, it's not going to work out. That's going to be Abe Lucas's job. But I think he played better than a third-round pick last year and warrants, maybe in a redraft being considered late first round. Cincinnati here. This is where I'm going to go ahead and go Jalen Petrie. You could go Jaquan Brisker, too, and I wouldn't hate either one. Petrie could kind of serve as maybe a future Mike Hilton replacement, but also you have Von Bell and Jesse Bates becoming free agents. And I just love the playmaking ability we saw from Petrie year one. Again, needs to clean up the tackling, but I just think that type of ability to find the football in the air and just has a nose for making plays. I think that's something that Cincinnati, obviously they passed on in the first round, but if they got the chance to do it all over again, would take advantage of and covet, especially with Dax Hill off the board in the spot. But him or Jaquan Brisker, I wouldn't be mad with either one, to be honest, because I also really like Jaquan Brisker as a prospect from Penn State. And you could even go Brisker here. I don't hate that, and maybe we will come back to that. But we get the Lions back on the clock. Safety could go quarterback, but ultimately they passed on that, and frankly, I think that was probably the best decision considering what we've seen in the 2022 draft class at the quarterback position. Andrew Booth Jr. could make for a good fit. Kenyon Green is kind of staring me in the face, but again, really rough first year for him. Man, they eventually do go running backs. So sorry, no Breece Hall in here. I think there's some running backs that deserve maybe going to the first round. Hall before the injury, Kenneth Walker. Probably not going to have Isaiah Pacheco go in the first round, but maybe. But he's more so a great story as a seventh round guy. Let's go Brisker. Let's go Brisker and Aiden Hutchinson. Let's go with two Big Ten guys to shore up that defense in this redraft. So let's go ahead and save it and let y'all see the entire 2022 NFL redraft. It was actually a little harder than I thought it might be. But let me hear your thoughts down below in the comments section. If every team got the chance to do it all over again with the 2022 draft, how much would stay the same? How much would change? And then ultimately here with this redraft, where did I get it right? Where did I get it wrong? Who should have gone in this first round of the redraft and who ultimately should have fallen out of this first round? Let me hear your thoughts down below in the comments section for your favorite team, but also who ultimately made it into the first round that maybe wasn't, and then who should have fallen out of the first round that I did put in the first round of this redraft. Again, love to hear your thoughts down below in the comments section. But that's going to do it for me. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, my name is Teach, and I am signing off.